All right, so now we are on to the last video in this classwork, video 3, or step 3, the third video, but really the second video as far as your headings, because hopefully you're getting used to this. We're actually only taking notes on the 2 videos in this class, the last 2, because the first one was just instructional. So I want to show you this when you're in the Google Doc. This is very common for word processors, and for the last video you should have notes here. When you're ready to do the next one, there's a couple of ways you could do it. You could just hit enter, and actually it would take you out of the notes part, and then you could just type video 2. Now in this case, what you can see here from the formatting is it's doing a heading 1 or a normal text. So what you can do here is either come up here and do a heading 2, or the other fun way to sometimes do this is just click inside the heading, the one that you know you're copying, and actually copy it, you know, and then update the content. That'd be the other way. Or use your Format Painter tool. And Format Painter is great because then what it does is it just takes the formatting of whatever is in this item and it copies it into the next one. Like, let me show you. So as an example, let's say this was again heading, or let's say normal like it was. I'd click into Format Painter and then I would click, drag, let go, and then it would format that as whatever was in here. And so now we're going to continue to take a few notes, and then won't be as long, I promise. That's interesting. Heading 16. Oh, here's what I'm noticing, and I'm not sure why, is that, let's do some content here. And maybe it has to do with the way I was copying it as well, but notice how, and make it consistent, notice how this is 11 font size and this is 16. So, you know, make them consistent. It's always interesting to try to go back and figure out why things happen the way they did, but often it's just better to move forward. Okay, so in this last video, I just want to add a few more topics, and then I'm going to show you how to submit this work. Okay, so the thing I want to add to the first video is when I was breaking down each of the items, the thing I want you to realize is this: when you work on classwork, it's only between you and I. When you work on hands-on, it's the work that you're submitting is between you and everyone else in the class, and you will see this in your first hands-on. Okay, so that's why we create another folder called the Shared with Rio that you will do in this item. Okay, and then the chapter quiz, this is done in Canvas and it's only between you and Canvas. I will see it, but it's really only between you and Canvas that you complete that. And then when you do the My IT Lab, you're actually using a separate system here. This is where you're working in My IT Lab and you will be submitting the work. And the way you'll submit the work is you'll submit print screen, or I'm sorry, PDF files. And I will show you how to do all that in these videos. As a recommendation, what I would say this week, and if you don't do it this week, I'll probably make you do it next week, so you might as well, if you want, get a head start, is actually to watch the video for quizzes. Which from here on out all the quizzes will be the same, just a different chapter is how they work. And then also look at the My IT Lab, the video, because this also is, even though it's different each week, the way you submit it is the same. Okay, so that's why I'm just saying I'll probably actually include that in next week's videos, but if you want to get a head start, do that. So here's the other thing I want to say in this regard, is that I talked about how this works, how this class runs as far as the calendar. And here's what I want you to know. I typically will grade every day unless something happens to my schedule. But my typical, and this happens probably 95% of the time, is I wake up in the morning, I do my morning routine, which is generally I go for a run, I do some yoga, I do meditation, and then I sit down and grade. So what this means for you, right? What this means for you is if you're working ahead of the due dates, what this gives me a chance to do is to actually grade the work. So as an example, this item's not due until Thursday night at midnight. Now I'm not going to grade it until Friday morning. So if you're submitting this item 24 hours ahead of the due date, there is a good chance I will have graded the work and given you feedback. And then therefore, if you got 100, cool, that's great. But if you miss something and you look at my feedback, then you can resubmit the work. And I really do this to encourage students to get it right and to continuously learn the pieces that they missed, or understanding how to get a better grade. And for all those reasons and more, I do this process, okay? It's really important on the technical things that we do, like the Hello World. That makes you actually, and actually this first class word is a little bit technical because what you're doing is setting up some things in Google Docs and sharing it and understanding the course. So the sooner you do all these things, the more time it gives me to give you feedback and for you to correct it. Okay? So those are two things I want you to understand: is A, how this work is submitted as far as who sees it, and then also the benefit of working ahead. Way, 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 way important. Okay? All right, so I've covered this class, I think, to at least give you a good heads up. And so what I want to do now is, on this last video, is just show you how to submit the work. Okay, so what I'm going to do, and this is just a little behind the scenes, because I'm looking at Canvas as myself, as a teacher, so I'm going to switch to this. To do this, I actually have to make this item available. So actually, let's do that. You will actually get to see a little of the behind the scenes, which is totally okay. So what I'm going to do is make week 1 available, which means both of the items are, and this video has been already recorded and good to go. So even though it's a prior semester, you could take a look at that as well. But now I'm going to switch to that student view, and now I can see that week 1. Okay, so I'm going to click in here, and so by now you have watched the first video, the second one the first video, which is really instruction, the first video that you've taken notes on, and now you've watched the second, right? So in here you won't have as many notes on this second one, but you should have a few notes that you've taken on this second video. So now, how do you submit this work? So you can either submit it, and this goes back to what I said in the very beginning, which is how you get the URL. Remember, I showed you how to do the Bentley shortened URL. I was going to use Google URL, but now I found out they're discontinuing it. So you can submit it either the shortened URL, or if you use like a Twitter shortener, you can do that, or you can use the long URL. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, right, because this is the long URL. And what's kind of interesting is the actual URL shows you what it is. And let me show you you don't have to do this piece, but I want to actually show you here. When you look at this long URL, it actually tells you quite a bit. One, it's docs.google.com. It's a document, okay? D, I think, indicates another subdirectory for documents. This is a unique document ID, and it even shows you what heading we happen to be on, right? So actually, in a sense, what we could do is remove this last part and it would still work. Doesn't really matter, right? So let me just show you that that's true. If I opened up another tab, right? See, it actually, the last part of that URL, and actually what's kind of cool here, and I will see this if you and I happen to be in the document at the same time, it actually will show you if there's other people in the document. Okay, I'm going to close this one out, right? So however you get the URL that indicates this particular document, and as long as you have shared the Shared with Rio folder, the next part is really pretty easy. I'm going to copy this, which I already had it copied, but I'll do it one more time. And all I did there is I dragged across the URL. I could do the same thing by clicking up in here and hitting copy, okay? And then I come over to classwork. And in classwork, what it shows you, by the way, in addition to the points you get and how it's broken down, and that you do get 25 points for submitting before the due date. Oh, you know what? I think I'll talk about this item next week too, so you get a little heads up on that. But if you come up to the top, what you see is submit the item, and it shows you it's a URL. That's how you're submitting it. It shows you the points. Really, you should think about to the syllabus to understand actually how much it represents as far as the overall score, because all items except for chapter quizzes are represented by 100, but what's important is the percentage of each item. Anyway, a little bit of a review there. So you come into submit, and now what you're going to submit in the web URL is, I'm going to paste. I've clicked into here, I'm going to paste, and that again is that long URL, which is totally fine. And then if you had any comments, right, you could put them here. You're not required to do comments, but if you wanted to do the shortened one, if you happen to walk through those steps when I did it, then you could do this, right? You could come up here, and instead of doing that long one, which I'll just delete, you could do the shorter one. It's just a little easier to see, okay? And then you would hit submit. Now, when you do that, by the way, when you go to grades now, what you will see is you will see you've submitted something into click, and if you click in here, oh, actually that's something different. Actually, that is actually to where, and I'll talk about this later in the semester, this actually shows you that you can actually, if you got points off and you wanted to know how that affected your overall grade, this is something that becomes important later, not necessarily right now, but you can actually manually put in a grade that is like a what if grade, but in this case I was looking for, let's see if it shows you, I'm looking for if you've submitted it. Actually, I think where it is, let's go back and look, because I want to actually, because sometimes Canvas changes these things and I like to know this. So now that I've submitted it, I'm going to come back into week 1, right? Now, here's one way you can see you've submitted it. If you come back and it says resubmit the work, then you know you've submitted it at least once, and then you can see submission details and the original page. So if I look at submission details, what I can see here is I've submitted the URL, and I can see any comments that I made that not used in the well, maybe you could as a student actually come back here if you wanted to. Now, why am I talking about this? The reason I'm talking about this last part, and again, this doesn't have to show on you up in your notes, I just want you to know this, is that if for some reason you gave me a wrong URL, or if you didn't add something and you're resubmitting, and this is important, is if you're resubmitting because you're adding to your work, then you have to resubmit the assignment, okay? So in this case, what I do is resubmit, and then I would give that same URL again. Okay, so every week when you're doing your classwork, you're giving me the same URL. What changes is the work, right? So in this case, next week, right, when you do your week 2, you're giving me the same URL, but it's giving me the same document that has your work in it that you've added to each week. And keep in mind, as I said before, the most current week goes at the top. Okay? All right. So I will end this video by leaving the student view real quick, and then just saying, you know, it's important that if you need help, you get help, right? The quicker you get help, the quicker you're going to get resolution and to be able to move on. Because this class has two due dates a week with 2 items due per week, you can see that actually missing 1 item can hurt you. And sometimes this work can be layered, meaning you need to do this item before that item. So getting behind is just not a great idea. I will talk about late work in the next week's classwork, just so you have that information. Okay, I do accept late work. It is discounted 25%, but it's better than not taking any work at all. So enough for this time. Hopefully you've submitted your classwork and you're good to go. So now what you would want to do is start looking at the week 1 Hello World. All right, have a good one, and I'll talk to you later.